greatest country in the history of the world. Our founding fathers understood that what makes a country great, it isn't necessarily its land, it's not its wealth, but it's the people that reside within it. No time in history before them had there been a constitution or a legal document set forth to govern a nation that relied on the individual and personal freedom and personal responsibility. That is the ideology that made the United States great and continues to make it great. But as we go forward, we see that that's changing. We stand on the shoulders of giants, whether it be educators in the past, whether it be our forefathers, whether it be our veterans that fought and died for our great country, whether it be mothers or fathers that raised generations of great children, whether it be entrepreneurs that created jobs, whether it be the slaves that were freed and went on to become successful and do their own job to prove that if they were left alone, they too could succeed. Those ideas of personal freedom and personal responsibility and the great ancestors we have before us have made us what we are today. We don't want to be the generation that lets that slide. Today we see that it's been going on for decades, that normal Americans and their personal freedom and responsibility has slowly eroded away. This is because all of our cultural institutions of power are dominated by the establishment, and particularly an establishment leftist ideology. This means that things like hard work and personal responsibility have been replaced with things such as victimhood and claiming that you're perpetually a victim and that's somehow worth something. A normal American works 9 to 5 and they just want to be left alone by the government. I've grown up in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. The people that I respect, the people I think are the salt of this country, are blue-collar workers that I see every day, my family and friends. Whether they be truck drivers, welders, they hunt for recreation and for a livelihood. Whether it be carpenters, whether it be educators or people in the service industry. These people just want to go to work, provide for their family, have a good life, and be left alone. Where is their voice? They've been drowned out amongst a chorus of the establishment left that controls all of our cultural institutions of power that shape the public narrative. Whether it be the mainstream media, which comes almost 95% from the establishment leftist perspective. The same is true of academia. The same is true of our entertainment industry in Hollywood. And you could also say that of the people that control Silicon Valley and many of these social media corporations. Imagine it. You work 9 to 5, you come home, want to relax, you turn on your local news. All of the information you get is from this establishment leftist perspective. So you turn the news off and maybe you get ready for your night class that you're taking. That academia is almost entirely coming from that establishment leftist perspective. So you say, you know what, I just want to forget about it all and tune on some television, something entertaining. So you turn on a late night comedy show. All of it's dominated by the exact same ideology, this establishment leftist perspective. So then maybe you go onto Facebook or Twitter or YouTube in order to talk to people that maybe share your life experience. But again, those are all ran by organizations and companies that come from that same establishment leftist perspective. And make no mistake about it, this isn't the leftist that's my friend or my neighbor that I'm talking about. These are oligarchs. These are people in the establishment, the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, that are really the movers and shakers and control the direction of our country. They don't care about normal Americans. The idea that it's left versus right, sure, there are things we disagree on, and I'm honest in this channel that I'm coming from the right. But I welcome my friends from the left that understand also that this corruption in the establishment needs to be fought. Until we fight back against this corruption, it doesn't matter if we're Democrats, Republicans, none of it will matter. Because the people that really control this country don't care about me and yours voice. The election of Donald Trump was the first time in my life that we see the possibility of outing the corruption of this establishment. And yet, and despite this, we see that the establishment is laughing. They think that they're still winning. People like James Comey that ran the FBI as a personal mercenary squad for the Democrats and Barack Obama laugh as they escape indictment after indictment, even as their crimes are made public for all to see. The media covers for them and celebrates this corruption. Academia and the entertainment industry in Silicon Valley go along with this. Where are the voices for normal Americans? But there is good news. There are people that are rising up. There are people that are running for office. There are people that are doing independent channels. There are people waking up by the millions that understand how corrupt this system is. Just the Iowa caucus starts to show many people on the left that didn't want to see it how corrupt the DNC and the establishment is. We should be reaching out and talking to all these people and making allies to fight back against this corruption. My channel is about being a voice for normal Americans, whether you're a blue-collar worker in rural Pennsylvania that's been maligned as clinging to your guns and Bible, that's been called a racist deplorable, Or maybe you're in the inner city and you grew up in a single parent household and you've been told you're a victim your whole life and you're just trying to succeed, but everything tells you, no, you're a victim. Don't try to go out and have personal responsibility and achieve on your own. Or anyone in between. This is a show for you. We are here to discuss the issues of normal Americans, to bring truth to everyday people that it's been hidden from by the oligarchs that really control our country and the establishment. They need to control the flow of information and all of those cultural institutions of power that I mentioned in order to make sure that they could pass their agenda, because they know the secret. If the normal person, if the average American were to find out how corrupt this was, they wouldn't stand for it. The way we win this battle is by bringing information to the millions and millions of Americans that have been lied to, that through the sweat of their labor, through their hard work, have enriched corrupt politicians, have enriched corrupt people in the media and other corrupt people that aren't elected to office like these bureaucrats, that have outsourced our wealth to other countries to further enrich the politicians that send that wealth over there. If the average and normal American wakes up to this, we can begin taking back our country. The war will be fought with information. That is what my channel and so many of the channels I'm associated are trying to do. That's what we're trying to do today. So please, I encourage you, follow my channel, support it, follow other independent content creators, follow the people that I'm connected to, and even if you're on the left, follow independent content creators on the left. But take away this gatekeeping power of the establishment to control all flow of information. Real people with facts and truth on their side do not hide from the First Amendment. We don't hide from open speech and open debate. We'll bring diverse opinions on. We'll bring people that disagree because we understand that we're about the flow of information and allowing everyone to make up their own mind. We do not need to censor voices like the establishment. So I welcome to my channel, the Normal America channel, and I hope that you'll enjoy yourself. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good one. Hello, how's it going? Trying out a new look today. I've been told that my camera is lower than my nose, which makes me look ridiculous. So I'm trying to use a tripod type setup today. So let me know what y'all think of the new angle. Hey, quarantine problems, trying to come up with constructive things to do. So thanks for being here, everyone. I really appreciate it. Is there any news other than the shutdown and the virus? I don't think so. A little bit, which we'll touch on regarding the corruption of our intel agencies, but not much other than that. So we'll go through, talk about some news of the day with that. But I also want to start off with some positive news that comes out of that. So a lot of my criticism is government agencies, executive branch, the executives in my state, such as Pennsylvania, my governor, Tom Wolf, other things such as that. I don't see much to be excited about governmentally, regardless if you're a Republican or Democrat. Let me just preface this by saying I'm not a Democrat. I'm still a Republican. I'll still most likely be voting for Trump. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize. So I don't see a lot that I'm too enthused with in our government or governments around the world with this. Taking away of rights, frivolously spending money, not being transparent with people about why this is occurring, etc. So, but there are also individual and private sector things going on. And some of it's crappy. You see, the downside of it, the people hoarding toilet paper and things like that. But I just wanted to share some stories and see if other people had things that they could share. And I'm going to try to be putting together a video where I just talk about these type of stories of businesses or individuals that are doing kind of amazing things on their own without government influence to try to make this better. So we all hear stories of certain businesses that are putting together ventilators like the MyPillow guy, which I think his story is fantastic. I mean, he's an American who started his own company, got wealthy, creates everything he does in America, creates American jobs, someone who's concerned about the pro-life movement and been working with that. And now he's going out of his way to, try to make ventilators, masks, and things of that nature to help out during this crisis. And there's plenty of stories like that I don't know as much about. But what I wanted to talk about is what I see locally. I live in Clarion County, and my wife works at a bank here. I work at a home health care place. Now, my place of employment hasn't done anything for me special or any of the employees special. it's a kind of a weird situation because we're in home health care. We were asked to sign waivers if the people we work with get the virus, if we would continue to work with them and things like that. My wife at the bank, on the other hand, and I don't care, I'll say the name of the bank. She works for S&T Bank. S&T has given them, while they work, $3.75 raises while they're at work. They also are switching to, the lobby is closed, so they're just doing drive-through, and they're switching to a week on, a week off. So they broke the people that work at the bank into two teams, and Team A will work 1 week and then Team B the other week. And the reason for that is if there's an outbreak, you're kind of limiting the amount of people at the store that would get ill, and they'd still have a second team that would be able to run and keep the bank going, while the first team would be able to, get hospitalized or stay at home to make sure that they're not at risk of spreading the outbreak. So they get paid their regular wage on their week off. Their week on, they're getting paid $3.75 an hour more. And I hear this with businesses all over. There's several banks in town that have done the same thing. There's healthcare agencies similar to mine that are giving people raises that are going to work. There's businesses all over the place that are paying people even though they can't come to work. And I think that kind of thing, at least in what I see, is one of the darkest times in my life as far as what I see going on in the nation. Not just the virus, but more importantly to me, the loss of rights and the fact that so many people that I considered allies in understanding that governments can be corrupt and the media is corrupt, now buying their version hook, line, and sinker and demanding that they take all of our rights away. I get depressed about that. But when I see individual companies, individual people, I've known people that are donating to families that are in need, that are trying to share wealth, the people that are still working, trying to support people that aren't getting paychecks now. And so there's a lot of good stories. And so I just encourage you. I'm trying to compile a lot of them to have specifics for you. I don't have that right now. But the only reason I bring this up at the top of the show is I find myself getting bogged down with this story. It's the only story basically worth talking about because regardless of the angle you're approaching it from, the virus and the potential to kill a bunch of people, or the collapse of the economy, or the loss of our rights and ushering in kind of a police state that will destroy the middle class, it's depressing to talk about. And when it's the only thing to talk about, it's hard to add new stuff every single day. And so you can't live your life in a constant state of, anger, depression, or whatever, just looking at the downside of things. So as always, leave it to the private sector, leave it to people with personal responsibility and individuals. That's why I played the promo video today. That's what this country was founded on, the great actions of individuals with personal charity, personal freedoms, personal responsibility. And that's where you'll see the bright spot in what's going on right now in the country and in the world in general. The dark spots, almost every time you have government action. They're incompetent at best, corrupt at worst. And so I just wanted to start off, is there a limit to how much cash a person can get at the bank? At my wife's bank, yes, but that's because there's a limit to how much cash is on hand. So as most of you know, we have what's called fractional reserve banking, which means banks are allowed to actually lend out basically 10 times the money that they actually have on hand. And as a result, if everyone in this country would go to the bank and try to pull their money out now, there would only be, I'm not an expert on this, but at the highest estimates, there would only be 1/10 of the money in actual print that's actually digitally in circulation. So if you try to go to the bank, at some point there'll be limits that are placed on. Now, if you call ahead and you call branch managers and set up that you wanted to pull out your $100,000 or whatever that may be, then I'm sure they could make accommodations to where you'd be able to get that out. But if you just pull up to the bank teller in the drive-thru right now, at least at my wife's bank, and you're like, hey, I have $100,000 in here, can I get it out? You're not going to be able to get it out. They have limits set. You have to make special arrangements to get more than that out. But so just the last thing, just to close on this, just look for things, look towards individuals for positive, for uplifting stories that come out of this. Don't look to the government. Don't look to the media. Don't even look to people like me talking about it. Look to people in your life, and you could really see people's true character. And you can see a lot of people are decent people. They might be misinformed. They might be ignorant of facts. But what's more important in life is your character and what your personal actions are doing. And I think that if you look, you'll see that there are good people out there that are trying to do the right thing. And there's bad people too, don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to see the brighter side of things. And those of you that have been watching, hey, thanks, WZ. Those of you that have been watching me know I get pretty angry about this stuff. So don't think that I'm just some foaming at the mouth lunatic all the time. The other thing I'll say real quick before I move on to kind of more depressing stuff is I haven't been doing as much material, and that's for 3 reasons. One, because my work schedule doing healthcare, as you may have guessed, is crazy right now. Everything's fine. No one that I'm connected with has the virus or anything like that. But you can understand that there's a lot of accommodations because working with people with disabilities, I'm already working with people that are in high risk situations for if they get any kind of infection, it's usually more serious because of the nature of their disability. So we're trying to do our best as a team in the company I work for to make sure that we avoid spreading infection at all costs. So that's the first reason, because my work situation's been crazy. The second reason has been the same thing that everyone's going through right now. I'm not in special circumstance, but I'm trying to survive with my family and make accommodations at home, and it's just crazy. It's a crazy time. And oftentimes it's hard to find 2 hours to sit down and do a live stream, or an hour to sit down and do videos and edit them and to put them out. So I do apologize for that. And the third reason is quite simply a lot of time. Yeah, absolutely. 223. Sorry but yeah, look to Jesus. Look to religion to inspire you to help get through this as well. So I should have mentioned that. But yeah, the last reason is it is difficult to just cover the same story every day and come at it with a new angle. And I think I've lost people that are interested in me because I've criticized the Trump administration. Again, I'll reiterate here throughout the video, I'm not just criticizing the Trump administration. I'm criticizing our government as a whole. I think that the Democrats are absolutely worse when it comes to this, but this doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to criticize the Republicans or Trump or other people that I support. I feel that they deserve that criticism, not in the case of Trump, not because I think that necessarily he's someone who's gleefully taking away our rights or frittering away our economy, but because he's being advised by people that want to do that want to destroy the economy and blame Trump for it. So that's what my criticism's about. So I think I've lost people based on that, but more importantly, I think I've lost people's attention, like a bunch of my friends that are independent content creators, because it's tough. It's a tough story to hear every day. And there's not a lot to add new every day about it. And what other news story, and that's primarily what my show is, covering news events, what other news story is out there? There's not a lot. So in the name of not oversaturating, I've cut down on content, and I'm trying my best to get different guests on that could... apparently my thing says shitdown, not shutdown. That's okay. That's a typo on my video title. The government shitdown. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So a happy accident for the typo for me. So yeah, that's what's been going on. People have asked me, oh, Rob, I haven't seen you, on Twitter as much. I haven't seen you doing videos as much. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. Please don't worry about me. There's enough people out there that are being far more negatively affected than me. So please don't worry about me. My health's fine. I just don't want to oversaturate you. And I am working behind the scenes with people. I'm going to have Todd Bartley on again. You should check out my live stream with him. It was last week. Last Wednesday, I think I did 2 fantastic shows, if I could pat myself on the back. The first was with Todd Bartley, who's a journalist that works out of Williamsport for 104.1 FM, and he's actually the best journalist I've seen in the country. He's not asking, he's not in the press pool in the federal government, but he is in the Pennsylvania government. And you have to understand, the situation is very analogous. Most of these state governors, they're having press conferences just like Trump every day, trying to update people. There's a press poll asking them questions, and much of the decisions and the questions should be similar. Todd's one of the people I hear that are asking questions such as, what is the threshold? What models are you using? What's the threshold for you when you'll start to lift these lockdowns, etc.? And the answers he's getting are not very inspiring from Governor Wolf and his team. In fact, it's downright depressing how they refuse to answer relevant questions, or when they do answer, it's so glib that it doesn't inspire confidence. So check out that interview from last Wednesday, and I'll have Todd on Again, I'm in communication with him about what's going on a day-to-day basis, and his area of expertise is in Pennsylvania. I'm also going to be, and I'll do a little preview video for this tomorrow, but tomorrow at 5 p.m., I'm going to be talking to someone who has a master's degree in economics from Yale, who's an entrepreneur, and his name's Monir Mahmood, and he's going to be talking to me about just the economic ramifications of what we see with these emergency spending bills, the unemployment situation that we're going to see, the collapse of small business. We're going to try our best not to make it partisan or not to even make it critical, criticizing the policies. There'll be some of that, obviously, but he's going to explain exactly what each of these bills mean. The potential infrastructure bill for $2 trillion, the emergency bill that's already passed for $2 trillion. That's the one that bailed out corporations and sending the $1,200 check to people. And also the Fed's $4 trillion liquidity plan that they're instituting. And he's going to break down what all of that means and questions we have on that. So I think that'll be worth checking out Friday at 5. There's also the potential that I will be getting a congressperson on to talk to me in the near future, someone in the House of Representatives in D.C. So I'm working on all that behind the scenes because I know people get tired of just hearing my fat face ramble on and on about my opinions on this all the time. Now there's my brother on. Hey, how's it going, Jesse? I hope everything's going well. So yeah, let's get started. So first, what I want to do is talk about a situation not related to this, and I don't have the article up. I apologize for that. But that is, of course, when stuff like this happens, it's good to keep an ear to the wind and see, are there other news stories that are kind of being lost in the shuffle? Because clearly this is probably the biggest story of my lifetime. And one of the stories that came out was that the Inspector General has basically written back to the leadership of the FBI, Chris Wray, that he has no confidence that they're reforming the FISA process. And I believe in that article, in his letter, he talks about how they looked at 23 other cases where a FISA court was used to get a warrant against Americans. And in each of those 23 cases, he found that the FBI violated their own protocols in the Woods procedure. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't get into the minutia of exactly what it is. But in layman's terms, the Woods procedure is the guidelines that are set forth by the FBI to constantly make sure that they're rechecking the information they submitted to make sure it's accurate when it comes to getting a warrant to spy on an American. And a violation of the Woods procedure, that's the Inspector General saying the FBI did not properly follow those guidelines to ensure that the information they originally submitted was accurate. Now, famously on my channel, we talked about the IG report on the FISA abuse in the case of Carter Page and in the case of the Trump administration, where basically, thanks to things like the two-hop rule, it's now admitted by the inspector who was appointed, that was suggested to look into things by the Democrats. So Inspector General Horowitz has admitted that the FBI not only, 17 times blatantly had falsehoods, intentional lies, etc. in the submitting of these applications, but then hundreds of times it said they violated the Woods procedure because they didn't constantly check in and re-verify this information that they submitted. That's just in that one case. And so, of course, the argument from all of the sympathizers in the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, and the intelligence agency, aka the deep state, all three of those groups comprise part of that, they were like, oh, it's just a simple mistake. I explained to you how it's not a mistake. I mean, the argument that they're making, that's almost scarier, right? And trust me, I'll wrap this into the situation we're seeing today. But the idea was that somehow the FBI, it wasn't that they're corrupt, it's they're incompetent. They're so incompetent, they didn't know that they weren't supposed to take evidence and change it to say the opposite of what it actually says. They didn't know that they weren't supposed to use unverified opposition research, that the actual direct source, when they interviewed, said, yeah, this is all a lie, it's all garbage. They didn't know they weren't supposed to use those lies to spy on a president of the United States. I mean, if that's their defense, incompetence, that's almost worse than corruption. But what we were told, it's just one case. Well, it's the biggest case. It's spying on the president of the United States. But now we know that's not true. 23 times the IG looked at cases, and every one of the 23 times there were violations. That's 100% of the cases that the IG looked at, there were violations, including after his original assessment came out of what happened during the Carter Page Trump fiasco. So it just goes to show, as predicted, as I knew, and look, I know this doesn't seem like a big story now, but it still is a big story, and that the people that are running our country behind the scenes, these bureaucrats, these intelligence officials that you've never voted for, they are corrupt, they will continue to be corrupt, and shame on the Trump administration for not holding these people accountable. Shame on Bill Barr. Shame on Jeff Sessions. Much of the statute of limitations on many of the crimes they committed, such as Comey lying to Congress, Brennan Clapper lying to Congress, the statute of limitations is running out. On some of them, they've already ran out. So they got away with these crimes. And they will continue. Nothing's going to change. The argument that people are making, oh no, just outing the abuse would be enough to change it. No, it's not. Nothing's changing. The FBI is still dragging their feet, refusing to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests. They're now using the coronavirus as an excuse to stop handing over evidence to people like Judicial Watch, which if you don't follow Judicial Watch, you should. It's one of the last few patriotic groups that are actually trying to, in a legal sense, hold people like the intelligence agents to account. And Tom Fitton is a saint, the work he's doing over at Judicial Watch, trying to get access to all this information, which at every step, the DOJ, and this is Trump's DOJ, the FBI, they drag their feet and try to stall as much as they can. So I just wanted to cover that story real quick to just kind of show that's one of the things we're missing. And to me, that is still the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. That we, remember, they say Watergate was a big deal. Two bumbling fools looking through a hotel looking for information on their opponent. Well, instead, Barack Obama and the Democrats weaponized the intel agencies to look for information on their opponent. And did so successfully. And smeared him for 3.5 years based on the information they received. It's unacceptable. And it will lead to the collapse of our country, corruption of that magnitude. That's more danger than anything China, Russia, any other countries' intel agencies could do to us. Now, how does that tie into what we're seeing with the coronavirus and the government shutdown and things like that? Whatever take you take on this FISA abuse scandal, I believe it was corruption. Right? But maybe you just believe it was straight old incompetence. Incompetence to the level now they've looked at 24 cases, all 24 of them the FBI violated procedure. That's staggering. If you don't think that's corruption, fair enough. I think you're naive if you don't think that's corruption. But okay, fine. Well, then it's at least incompetence of a staggering level. The same people, the same type of people that we put in charge of our defense from intel agencies like the CIA and the FBI and defense from terrorism and things like that, that you now have to admit are either incredibly corrupt or incredibly incompetent. That entire metaphor, that entire shell that we see of that, them acting as, what's the word I'm looking for? Specialized defense against that sort of thing. That's exactly what we're seeing with these government agencies that are specialized in defending us from things like this virus. The CDC, other groups. The truth is, they're corrupt or they're incredibly incompetent. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I have no medical training whatsoever that's relevant to this virus at all. I've admitted from the get-go, I have no idea this virus could kill 5 million Americans. It could kill 5,000 Americans. It's most likely to kill a number in between them somewhere, but I don't know. I've admitted that from the get-go. I have no clue. Way back in January when I was doing like the Patriot panel and shows like that, and people were saying, hey, Rob, what's your thoughts on the virus? I was like, I don't know. It could be a bioweapon. My initial thought, which I stand by as still being the correct thought, was, I'm not sure, but isn't it a shame that we don't have a government or a media that we could trust to handle things like that? Yep. That's still where we're at today. So I think my original take was spot on about this. But as far as the specifics, I didn't know. So please don't think what I'm about to say, it comes from a special place of expertise. I'm talking to you as a layman who likes to have a few beers and watch the Pittsburgh Pirates at this time of year, normally in a bar, with a bunch of people that are way older than me telling me when the Pirates used to be good back in the 70s. Because in my lifetime, they've sucked. But I miss baseball. Anyways, that's it. I don't have expertise in this. I watched the CDC put reports out that said, hey, don't run out to buy masks, like doctor's masks. Don't worry about that. That doesn't help you. Now, anyone with half a brain could be like, wait a minute, this is a respiratory illness comes through, right, into your lungs. Wouldn't a mask help from a viral? I don't know exactly how it spreads, but it seems any type of, respiratory illness, a virus like that, a mask would help. It might not solve the problem, but it seems it would be better to have one than not. But the CDC said that was a lie. That no. Don't do that. Now the CDC has changed their tune. Yeah, we need more masks. Now, how is it that my initial thought is just a layman who likes to drink beer and watch the Pittsburgh Pirates? How did I know more than the CDC? Well, the truth is I didn't. The truth is the CDC is corrupt. Or they're incompetent, whatever you want to take. Now, if I'm playing devil's advocate, the argument would be, well, they didn't want people to rush out and buy masks because they want the most vulnerable populations to have those. But think about this. That doesn't really make sense if you look at it, because the way these masks are going to be shipped is you're going to have some that are going to hospitals and things like that just by the nature of the companies that are manufacturing and selling them. And then some will be going for personal use at private stores like Walmart or CVS or Target. So why would people rushing to CVS or Target to buy masks influence how many people could get masks in a hospital? That has to do with on the shipping end. If the CDC was really worried about that, they'd have went to the companies that manufacture these masks and say, hey, just make sure you're not sending these to Walmart or Target anymore. Just send them to the hospitals or stockpile them until the government could get their hand on them. Why would they tell people not to buy masks? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Even if every mask would have sold out day one from Target because people were mass hoarding them, that wouldn't have affected how many hospitals are getting masks. It's not like the hospitals are going to CVS to buy these masks. So the entire rationale that they used didn't make sense in the first place. And that's if you're being charitable, giving the CDC the best possible explanation. I mean, to me, there's only two explanations. One, they're incompetent and they have no idea what they're doing. That should scare the crap out of you. The premier agency in the United States that's supposed to be looking out for your health interest has no clue that a mask would help from a respiratory illness. Yet they're the ones that are advising the president on what policies to make. Because of them, we're going to have a depression in this country. We're having economic collapse at a faster rate than we've ever seen because of people from the CDC that didn't know that a mask would help protect you from this virus. Or they did know and they're corrupt. And that's even worse. Now, look, I know it's getting conspiratorial, but it's something that I said from the get-go. I didn't predict a virus would do it, but I did say that the elite in this country, the establishment, that they would try to intentionally tank the economy, not just to take out Donald Trump's chances, that's the short-term goal, but the long-term goal is they want to usher in globalism. And the biggest impediment to globalism is the middle class, particularly in the United States. This has been going on for years. They're trying to erode the middle class. They want everyone to be poor and dependent on the government or in the wealthy elite. They want a return to feudalism. And they don't just want it in the United States. They want it all over the world. But things like national pride, self-sufficient people, people using personal responsibility and liberty. You see where I played the promo here at the beginning, where I talk about the reason the United States is the greatest country in the history of the world is because it is the first country and still the best that codified that the country is based on the individual and personal freedom and responsibility. That's what they seek. They're anathema to that. They seek to erode that. That's what globalism means. Total dependence on the government. Haves and have-nots. And the haves will give the have-nots bread and circuses as long as the have-nots don't criticize the haves. That's not a life that I want to live. A life totally devoid of freedom, totally dependent on others for my sustenance. That's what I'm fighting against. That's the idea of globalism that I'm fighting against. And I said they'll try to wreck the economy in the short term to get rid of Donald Trump. And in the long term, they want to erode the middle class so that they could usher in globalism. And I have to admit, I did not anticipate how successful they would be or how quick they would be able to accomplish this goal. But that's what occurred, and I'll get to more on that in a second. So in that vein, does the CDC want the disease to spread? I don't know. Either they're corrupt and they want the disease to spread, or let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're grossly incompetent and didn't think that masks would benefit you. Is that better? Does that make you feel better? Oh, no. It's not that the people that we look to for guidance in these times are corrupt. They just have no idea what the hell they're doing. Okay. If that helps you sleep at night, it doesn't help me. So that's how I know. It's the same with the World Health Organization. Now they're on a global, the World Health Organization's the global body that's supposedly looking out for us to fight against things like pandemics. I remember, I believe it was in mid to late February, I remember doing a video, a live stream, where I talked about that day, the World Health Organization, right, this is after it's already a disaster in China. And they're worried it's going to spread elsewhere. It's starting to spread elsewhere. And instead of releasing the World Health Organization, releasing statements on here's what governments can do to keep this in check, or here's what you as an individual could do to keep yourself safe from this virus. You know what they released this particular day, and I remember commenting on it? They released a letter that was basically telling people, don't be racist to Asian people. Don't blame the Asian American for this outbreak. If you're in UK, don't blame Asian British people for this outbreak. Yeah, we get it. We don't need what's supposed to be the premier health body in the country telling us not to be racist. We get it. Are there some people out there that are racist? Yeah, sure. Okay. That's a pittance important compared to actually collapsing the economy, taking away our rights, people dying of a virus. People saying mean things about Asian people way down at the bottom of the scale. And by the way, you should say mean things about China. You shouldn't say mean things about the American of Asian descent. They have nothing to do with it. I don't have to explain that to you because you're not morons. But the World Health Organization thinks you are. Not only that, they defended China. They said China did a great job with this. That's the agency that we're looking at where we get our numbers and the models for how many people could die and reference to what exactly our government should be doing. That agency that was more concerned about looking racist and virtue signaling against racism than actually keeping people's lives saved from dying of a disease or fighting back against economic destruction. So that's the CDC and the World Health Organization. Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, I could show you pictures of them hanging out with Bill Gates, piling around with the Clintons. Does that mean we automatically should be distrusting of them? No. But I've been lied to so many times by government aid. And by the way, this is a lesson not just for government, but in life. There are very few people that you should trust implicitly. Let me tell you right now, I am not one of those people. Why? Because you don't have a personal relation. Maybe my brother that's on here, right? But other than that, if I say something, don't just take my word as gospel. Look it up. I'm just giving you things from my point of view. It doesn't mean that I can't be wrong. Heck, I could even be lying. I'm not. I think my body of work shows the hours upon hours that I'm authentic. That's who I am. Even when it hurts me in my channel, it would be easy for me to just come on here and just bash the Democrats and say, yeah, the Republicans are doing great. But that's not what I do. But you shouldn't just blindly trust me. And you certainly shouldn't just blindly trust the government or their agencies. Why would you? How many times do they have to lie to us? Iraq war, overthrowing the Shah, installing Castro, Libya, Syria, bailing out the bankers, Vietnam. How many times are we going to get lied to? That's just a handful. I mean, there's hundreds. How many times are we going to get lied to before we say, what did I say about the whole Russia hoax thing? For example, I have no idea, to this day, I have no idea if Russia was the people that hacked the DNC server. I doubt that they were. I know that people say it was probably Seth Rich. I know that people like Bill Binney, formerly of the NSA, who's brilliant, says that the download speeds were too high, that it had to be directly from a thumb drive. I don't have proof of those things either, but I believe those people more. But still, I'm not going to violate my own role and just implicitly believe them without proof. It's certainly a possibility, though. Could the FBI be telling the truth that it was Russia? They could be. But I'm not going to believe them without seeing proof. And they haven't offered any. Why? Because they've lied to me over and over and over again. So I'm not going to believe them. Show me the proof, or I don't believe you. It could be true, but I'm going to act as if it's an unproven claim until it's proven to me. I'm no longer going to accept an appeal to authority. Well, it's the FBI. Well, it's the CDC. Well, it's Dr. Fauci. Yeah, sorry. I've been lied to too many times by people in positions of authority. Show me the proof. So when I hear these numbers that are being bandied about by Fauci or Birx or the World Health Organization or the CDC, and I can look and I can see obvious errors right out of the gate, like the World Health Organization saying China did a good job, or the CDC saying masks won't help you. Why should I believe then the rest of the stuff that they're saying? That doesn't mean that what they're saying is necessarily wrong. I'm just saying I don't believe it implicitly without facts to back it up. I just don't. Now, let me go back to what my original stance was on this. And I tried to make this as clear as possible. And understand, I'm on places like Above Top Secret and other blogs. I'm on Twitter. And I'm discussing things I'm discussing things with people that mostly would consider themselves Trump supporters, fiscal conservatives, people that were concerned about constitutional rights. And many of them are telling me, it's just an old piece of paper, the Constitution, and sometimes you have to give up your rights if there's an emergency, etc. Which is shocking to me. Shocking. The same people that were like, we don't believe the FBI about this Russia crap, now they're believing everything the CDC says about this virus. Okay, fine, to each their own. But when I'm talking to these people, they keep saying, oh, look, 1,000 people died yesterday in the United States. See, that proves you're wrong. How does that prove I was wrong? Is it that they're intentionally misconstruing what I originally said? Or did I not do a good enough job of presenting it? So I am 100% convinced, let me say 99.99999% convinced, that my original take on this is still the correct take. And it's not because I have more insight than other people or anything like that. It's because I took a position that I don't think is that extreme at all. Like, for example, I could say I'm 99.999% right, confident that I'm correct when I say, you should eat. Don't starve to death. It's good to eat food. That's not a controversial position. Well, it's the same here. I'm not taking, people misconstrue and say, oh, you're taking an extremist libertarian position that says the government can never encroach on our rights, even in cases of emergency. So let me just, again, try to, maybe it's because I've been angry at people and I've been arguing with them and I'm disappointed about this whole situation. So let me, as calmly as possible, break down what my original stance on this is. I am not saying that the government could never encroach on your rights in cases of an emergency. I'm not even saying that what the government did here was necessarily wrong. My gut tells me strongly that it was. I'm just saying something real simple. That before you accept infringement on your rights, and before you accept the intentional collapse of the economy, and make no mistake about it, everyone from your state governor, if they're Republican or Democrat, that's put the lockdown in place and told many businesses they can't open, right up to the top to Trump and the federal government. It is an intentional collapse of the economy. Not intentional in the case of Trump that he wanted the economy to collapse, but he knew that his actions would collapse the economy. He knows it. Now, you might say that's worth it. That's fair enough. We can have the debate. But what they knew the actions they were taking would significantly collapse the economy. That's what I mean. So before we accept actions that do that, even if they're under great motivations, the reasons for doing that are great. And before we accept severe infringements on your rights, which I've been talking about this for weeks. What rights are being violated? Conservatives told me. Well, they're now talking about using Bluetooth technology to basically scan everywhere you go. They're talking about using drones. They're talking about if you're seen out past a certain time, they'll arrest you, etc. Neighbors reporting on neighbors when they're out when they shouldn't be. Police state stuff. As I said it would be. It wasn't hard to predict again. So before we accept that loss of rights and before we accept the collapsing of the economy, it is incumbent, two things should happen. One, every American worth their salt should question it and demand answers to questions. And second, even without that first part, it is incumbent on the government to answer basic questions before they do these policies. That's it. That was my stance. So saying, oh, it looks like 250,000 people will die. How about that, Rob? You were wrong. How was my statement wrong? Of course that I'm still correct in that. If the government would have came out and said this, listen, we're looking at models that are suggesting there's a decent probability that 2 million people could die of this virus. This, by the way, these are my 4 initial questions that should have been answered. What is the magnitude? How many people could potentially be infected or die from this? Second, what is the probability of that worst case scenario happening? So you might say, oh, it could have infected and killed 10 million Americans, but there's only a 0.00001% chance of that happening. Okay, well, that affects how you react to it, right? So what was the magnitude? What is the probability? What is the threshold for when the government could take the actions that they've deemed necessary, infringing on our rights, collapsing the economy? And then lastly, how will those solutions, what is the cost benefit of that solution? How many lives will it potentially save? How many lives will it potentially destroy? To this day, those questions haven't been answered sufficiently. Though at least there's some attempt at their bandying about some numbers now. But too little, too late. And let me just get to the end story why. It sounds callous and cold, but I'm not like the government. I'll give you actual numbers. That argument, the threshold argument, is uniquely important. At what point is the government allowed to infringe on your rights? What is their philosophical reason? This isn't something people act as if, oh, well, the government's just there, and then a situation happens and they go, oh, crap, what do we do about this? Well, that's not the way things are supposed to occur. In life, we're never just blank slates that when a problem arises, we have no idea what to do. We use our life experience, our limited knowledge of what this particular situation may be, and we take all of that and we come up with an initial response. Now, you might be willing to adjust your response as time goes on once more information comes about. But we all have that. That's just the way things are. And the government should be no different. So it's not as if, a pandemic hit, we never thought that this was possibly a case. Of course they did. The government has to have an idea of, okay, we have these, if an emergency occurred, like let's say, hypothetically, a different situation. Let's say that a Carnival cruise ship is off the coast of Florida and it gets bombed by Chinese airplanes and it kills everyone on the ship. There is a threshold that the government has that says, if a foreign country does something that crosses this line, then we will respond. And if they cross the next line, then we'll respond harsher, right? So there's those thresholds. If China executes one American citizen that was accused of stealing in China, that's probably not enough of a threshold that would cause us to have significant sanctions or go to war or something like that. But if they kill 5,000 Americans, that probably is a threshold. So you have those arguments. What I'm saying is, you don't need to know the specifics to have the government answer those types of threshold questions. Because the answer wouldn't change. So when we're talking about how many people are you worried would die of a disease before you think it's appropriate to lock down the country, you could ask that question even if there wasn't a disease on the horizon. It's a philosophical question about government interventions of liberty versus safety. And the government should be able to answer that. Now, maybe it will change from administration to administration. That's fine. But certainly, once an emergency is on your doorstep, it is incumbent on the government to explain to you, this was what we were looking at. This is when we said, if we cross this point, we have to act in a certain way. But they didn't answer that, and they still haven't. And if they don't answer the threshold question on, when did you say, once we cross this point, we have to start locking people down? If they don't answer that, how do you think they're going to answer the question, okay, what's the threshold for letting people go back to work? They're not going to answer that. If we don't know when the threshold for it was telling people you can't go to work, how do we know what the threshold is for telling people you could go back to work? And what this does, the fact that they were unwilling to answer these questions, it means that no matter what happens with this, the government will say, yes, we were right to take your rights away. If 5,000 people die, they'll say, see, we saved everyone's life. If 5 million people die, they'll say, see, more people would have died if it wasn't for our actions. Now, let me give you the cold, hard numbers. If 1% of this population in the United States, it's about 327 million people in the United States. If 1% would have died from the coronavirus, that's 3.27 million people. That is a tragic number. That's roughly what dies a year anyways. And keep in mind, many of the people that die of coronavirus probably would have died of something else this year because it tends to affect people with pre-existing conditions. But let's just say even at that. So instead of the normal 1% of the population dying this year, it would have been 2%. An additional 1% would have died of coronavirus. That's tragic. Picture every loved one you've lost this year. Now picture multiplying that by 2. Instead of just one of your aunts dying, it was 2, etc. It's tragic. I'm not making light of that. However, our country could have survived that. Life would have went on. The economic collapse. It's going to be far worse than the virus. Far worse. More people will die as a result of the economic collapse that we're about to see. More people's livelihoods will be crushed. There'll be more substance abuse problems, more suicide attempts, more mental health issues, people eating worse. So you'll have more diabetic issues, more heart disease issues, more DUI casualties as substance abuse increases. As the economy declines, you see things like more pollution, which will lead to more deaths from things like that. Everything. It'll be hard to directly contribute or to directly link the economic collapse, but you'll see those to an individual death, but you'll see those numbers spike. And I'm very much concerned about the economy, but let me tell you, we as a country will survive this economic collapse. We will. And it's going to be way worse and way more impactful than the virus, for sure. But you know what the country can't survive? The country can't survive a population that unquestionably accepts any infringements of rights by the government. And that is what I've been warning about from the get-go. If we allow the government to take away these rights, to collapse the economy, without question, without them answering basic questions, they have set the precedent for doing it over and over and over again. If they don't have to answer the threshold question when next year's flu, because think about it, and it's not just liberals saying this. This is conservatives, Trump supporters I see saying this. You can't put a dollar value on a human life. We have to do everything possible to save all lives. How does that argument not apply to next year's flu season? How does that argument not apply to getting rid of guns? How does that argument not apply to the Patriot Act and fighting terrorism? Or the Green New Deal? It doesn't matter how much it costs. We have to do everything possible to stop anyone from dying. That's the argument being set forth. And I've been told dozens upon dozens of times. The mere fact that I'm concerned about rights and the economy show that I don't care if people die. I mean, it's nonsense. And this, again, it's not just left-wing people. Trump supporters, supposed fiscal conservatives, constitutional conservatives, making this argument. If our population's willing to accept that now, they'll be willing to accept it next time. And that will be the end of the country. That'll usher in the globalism that they desire. That'll usher in the end of national borders. Everything will be done in the name of save the kids, save the sick people. You're selfish if you won't give away your rights. That'll be the end of the country. That's why we should force them to answer these basic questions. Now, had they answered the questions, let's say that they would just, so I'm saying even 1% of the country dying still wouldn't justify what I've seen. But let's say this is what they said instead. Look, we looked at the numbers and we think that there's a chance that 5 million people could die. And we don't know what the probability is, but we think it's significant enough of a threat that warrants an action. Our threshold is we think that if 100,000 people could potentially die of this, we need to have a lockdown to be able to solve this. And we think that the lockdown will be able to achieve this because what we're seeing the way the virus spreads, if we have people stay and only do essential businesses, we could curb that disease anywhere from 20 to 50%, which means we could save possibly 50,000 lives. And we think that that's worth it. Now, I might have ultimately not agreed with that conclusion. And what's even more, that conclusion could end up being disproven at the end of the day. It could either be way worse, the amount of deaths, or way less, the amount of deaths. But at least I'm more willing to accept that because now I understand what the thought process was. I understand that this is now not setting the precedent where they could say whenever they want, okay, we need to take your rights because we're saving any life. They were specific. We could disagree on the numbers. We could disagree on what their threshold was, but at least they've been transparent about it. And so next year when they come out and they say, oh, flu season, we need to take away your rights. And I say, wait a minute, I thought the threshold was potentially 100,000 people dying or 1 million people dying. Can you show me proof that this flu season's going to be anything like that? They'll have a far more difficult time. But when you just blindly accept anything the government says without questioning it, now you've set the precedent. And to me, as I've already explained, setting that precedent is the worst thing. It is the biggest danger for the country. So they could have taken the exact actions that they took. They could still be wrong. They could have been right. I don't know. We'll see. My strong gut feeling is that they're wrong. I'm 99% sure that they're wrong. But even when I'm saying what my initial stance is, it would have been far better to force them to answer questions before they took these actions. And I was told there's no time to ask questions. If you're asking questions, you don't care about old people dying of the disease. Now's not the time to divide us. We have to be behind whatever the government does. And I said, if you take that tack, that's the exact argument the Democrats are going to use to push the Green New Deal. They're going to say, look, climate change is going to kill the entire world. It's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. Therefore, we have to do the Green New Deal. And they'll say, we don't have time to question the specifics. You don't care about people dying of climate change? That's what they'll say. They'll use every argument that conservatives are using now. Not all conservatives, by the way. And I was told, no, that's stupid. The government's there to help us. We just have to trust them. $2 trillion emergency spending with billions of dollars in pork projects to places like the Kennedy Center. The Democrats' version would have been $500 billion more that basically was just the Green New Deal. $4 trillion in Fed liquidity, which basically doubles the balance sheet of the Fed. $2 trillion infrastructure plan planned. So far we're up to $8 trillion, and there will be more phases to this. And we couldn't question any of it. We couldn't. And I told people, this is what's going to happen. Even if you think that this virus is serious, if you allow the government, if you give them a blank check and you say, we promise we won't question you, it will be abused. And that's exactly what happened. And I still have people saying, see, Rob, 1,000 people died yesterday. That proves you were wrong. How was I wrong? If I'm not allowed to question the Trump's response, suggesting locking down sectors of the economy, or my Democrat governor, Tom Wolf's response, shutting down the entire state, only essential businesses open. If I'm not allowed to question that, why should other people be allowed to question the Democrats' bill? The same reaction, if you're one of the people that is a Trump supporter or you're Republican and you're like, yeah, we can't question the Trump administration on this. Lives are at stake. Everything they're doing is in our best interest. We don't have time to question it. If that's your belief there, you know that feeling you had when you found out what was in Pelosi's bill? Like all this, we're going to have diversity panels and every company that gets money has to have as many black people and women on the board. And you're like, wait, what? What does this have to do with fighting this virus again? Your gut reaction in questioning that is exactly right. You should question that. Are they exploiting? What does any of this have to do with fighting a virus or helping the immediate economic emergency? Nothing. It has nothing to do with it. It's them consolidating power and pushing through their garbage progressive agenda. That's what it was. You were right to question that. I'm just like you, except I'm questioning all sides of the equation. That's it. No matter how much you trust Trump or you trust Republicans, you should still not unquestioningly accept anything they say. So even if you think, yes, this lockdown was good. Yes, we needed to do this. And yes, I understand it'll hurt the economy. You still should have demanded answers to these basic questions. All right, so. Crap. I didn't do this right, did I? Oh, there it is. Yes. All right, so what I want to do is. Let's see if this is showing up. I want to read this thread on Twitter. I don't know who Adam Townsend is, but he's linking to a letter that I'm going to read from one of the premier health officials in Germany, talking about the need to answer basic questions before locking down the country. He's talking about Germany, but it's analogous to the United States. So first, let me read this thread, and then I'll read this German doctor's thoughts on this. He says, update New York City COVID-19 numbers. Note the cases with no underlying conditions. Almost none. 14. New York City numbers are cooked so that if it died and it tested positive for COVID-19, book it. Dr. Sukrit Bakdi, Professor Emeritus of Medical Microbiology at the Johannes Gutenberg University, Mainz, quote, "The mistake is being made worldwide to report virus-related deaths as soon as it is established that the virus was present at the time of death, regardless of other factors. This violates a basic principle of infectiology. Only when it is certain that an agent has played a significant role in the disease or death may diagnosis be made. The Association of Scientific Medical Societies of Germany expressly writes in its guidelines, in addition to the cause of death, a causal chain must be stated with the corresponding underlying disease in third place on the death certificate. Occasionally, 4-linked causal chains must also be stated." End of quote. More of the letter, and this letter was sent to Merkel. COVID-19 general suspicion, and is it intended to continue this categorization uncritically as in other countries? How then is a distinction to be made between genuine corona-related deaths and accidental virus presence at the time of death? Now I'll get to that letter in a moment. Dr. John P.A. Ioannidis, Ioannidis, Departments of Medicine, of Epidemiology and Population Health, of Biomedical Data Science, and of Statistics, Stanford University, published a paper, Coronavirus Disease 2019, The Harms of Exaggerated Information and Non-Evidence-Based Measures. Quote, "It's important to differentiate promptly the true epidemic from an epidemic of false claims and potentially harmful actions." Question 1. Is the most important indicator for judging danger of COVID-19 reported number of positive tested persons over deaths? Second, the number of persons actually or unexpectedly developing dying from pneumonia excess mortality. Health population equals mild, moderate COVID-19 disease cases can be expected. In other words, should we be looking at anyone who had corona and died, or should we be looking specifically at people that died of corona? CDC arrived at a forecast of plus minus 100K to 240K dying of COVID-19 by modeling it on New York City. Equals, if it's no longer moving, it died of coronavirus. In other words, the model that Dr. Fauci's talking about of 100,000 to 240,000 dying of coronavirus is saying anyone who dies who happened to have had the virus. Now, for example, I could have coronavirus as a relatively healthy 35-year-old person and exhibited no signs, been totally asymptomatic. If I have a stroke tomorrow and die of that stroke, and they test me to find out that there was coronavirus antibodies in me because I had the virus, they'll put down my cause of death as coronavirus. And that's not true. Going back to the New York City chart, 3,000 to 9,000 people over 65 die monthly of influenza and pneumonia. That's plus or minus 50% of the U.S. population that have hypertension. President of Germany's Koch Institute confirmed test-positive deceased people are counted as corona deaths, regardless of the real cause. We consider someone with a coronavirus infection to be a corona death. You starting to see the problem here? French study found that, quote, overstated the problem of COVID-19 because, quote, not significantly different mortality of COVID-19 from ordinary coronaviruses, cold viruses, which were examined in the hospital in France. In other words, the mortality rate of the coronavirus is no worse than, or of the COVID-19 is no worse than regular cold virus coronaviruses. And the reason it seems so much worse is, imagine that you had a cold, but you died of cancer, and they said you died of the cold. That's what they're doing with coronavirus. So when you just look at the numbers, in that sense, you're like, oh my God, look at how many people died of coronavirus. But instead, what we should be doing is looking on an average year of how many people die of all illnesses or all causes in a country, and then looking this year with the added coronavirus, how many people are dying. And I'll get to a specific on that in a second. Internationally recognized experts such as the president of the World Medical Association, Frank Montgomery, Yale professor David Katz, are for curfews to be lifted quickly because it equals counterproductive and ultimately kills more people than the virus itself. Risk groups should be protected. Now, I recommend everyone watch this interview with this Stanford medical professional with Ben Shapiro last Saturday. It's Friday or Saturday. And in that interview, he talks about that there's two possibilities that are going on with this virus. One, he talks about the important thing is that we need to, the types of tests we've been doing to see if people have the virus are RNA tests, and we need to do a different type of test. I'm not going to claim to be a medical professional, but this test unlike the one we're currently using, will show if there are antibodies in people's blood or in people's bodies to the COVID-19. And the reason for that is this, because the current test is only being tested on people suspected of possibly showing signs of the illness. So that's going to give us a skewed mortality rate. Whereas if we took a random general population, you would maybe find out that many people had already had the disease, have antibodies in their body because they had the disease and successfully fought it back with almost no symptoms. Maybe they thought it was a normal cold. Maybe they were asymptomatic and didn't have any symptoms at all. And the way we discuss mortality rates is we take the numerator, which is how many people have died of the disease, which should theoretically be much easier to find, but I'll get to that in a second. And then the denominator, because you're looking at it like a fraction, is how many people in total have had the disease. But we have no idea what the denominator is because we haven't done randomized testing on the American population. Instead, the denominator is skewed because we're only testing people that supposedly have symptoms, by and large. So that means it'll look like far fewer actually had the illness than it did. And because of that, think about it. Let's just take the common flu. Let's say in your particular town, on an average year, 100 people get the flu. Or it's thought that 100 people go to the hospital and say, I have the flu. 10 of those people died. That's a 10% mortality rate from the flu. That's incredibly high. But maybe there were an additional 9,900 people that didn't go to the hospital and had the flu because it was just, I got the flu, I'll deal with it at home for 2 or 3 days. And none of those people died. Now, instead of having 10 out of 100 dying, you have 10 out of 10,000 that died. All of a sudden, the flu doesn't seem that serious as a cause of mortality. Well, that's exactly what we're seeing here. So we have no idea what the denominator is. But what's worse is what this evidence is showing, we don't even know what the numerator is. Because they're artificially inflating the numerator, or how many people died of the virus, by saying if you show any signs of having this virus, no matter what you died of, we'll say it's because of COVID-19. So not only is the denominator way smaller than it probably really is, the numerator's way inflated. That's where we get things like 10% mortality rate in Italy, which Italy was one of the things that's been used by my governor, Tom Wolf, and at the federal level for the reasons for the shutdowns that we're seeing. We don't want to get as bad as Italy. And these doctors, it's not just crazy conservatives like me. Here we list several doctors that are worried that the cure, like Trump said, is going to be worse than the virus. More people will die of the economic crash than will die directly responsible from coronavirus. Imagine if we calculated deaths on the economic collapse the same way they're calculating deaths based on COVID. Well, did you lose some of your financial well-being as a result of the shutdown? Yes, I did. Oh, well, then if you die, we're going to chalk that up. That was death because of the shutdown. Yeah, but I got, my brother, yeah, of course, he lost money. But he got hit by a car. What's that have to do with the depression? Oh, no. As long as he showed the signs of symptoms of the economic decline, then that's what will justify it as a death. If we calculated those numbers, they would be in the hundreds of millions that will die as a result of the economic depression. But that would be unscrupulous and disingenuous to calculate the numbers like that. But that's what they're doing with the COVID virus. According to Professor Walter Riccardi, only 12% of the test-positive deceased in Italy consider the coronavirus as a causal factor, which corresponds to a few dozen people per day. The normal all-cause mortality in Italy is around 800 or 1,800 people a day. Do you get what it's saying? Only about 12% of the people that Italy said died of the coronavirus actually died of the coronavirus. That means the mortality is 1/10 of what they're telling us, which puts it in line with what we're seeing in other countries. Closer to 1% instead of 10%. And when we look at it in perspective, 1,800 people die a day in Italy. About a dozen are dying of coronavirus a day. Is that worth shutting down not just Italy, but the world? Experts have already explained the situation in Italy has less to do with coronavirus than with the local risk factors, including extreme air pollution, mass panic, collapsed healthcare system, the curfew itself, median age of the deceased is around 80 years, 99% had previous illnesses, etc. Now, if you remember, if you go back a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, I did a video where I talked specifically about Italy. Again, the reason Italy is important is because it's being cited by officials in America justifying the shutdown, saying Italy's the worst case scenario. We don't want to be like Italy. So I delved into the numbers. At the time, it was around 3,500 people had died in Italy of their official numbers of the coronavirus. That number is more like 12,000 now, which it was to be expected that the number would increase. Now, I went and looked at the normal flu rates based on World Health Organization studies. And from the years of 2013 to 2017, during just the 4 months of flu season, 60-something thousand people had passed away. So it came down to, per month during flu season, roughly 2,800 people a month dying. So let's just break it down to 2,000 a month, even say, just to be as conservative as possible. 2,000 people a month die of the flu in the 5 months of flu season every year in Italy. You know what that number was? At the same time that I checked 2 weeks ago, 3,500 plus died of coronavirus. Keep in mind, on average, over 2,000 died of the flu a month. So we're into February, March. Do you know how many people had died of the flu this year in Italy? 254. Let me repeat that. On an average month during flu season, the flu kills, it's the most conservative number I could find, 2,000 people a month. You got that? 2,000 on an average month. So we're 3 months into flu season. How many people had died of the flu in Italy? 254. Normally it would be over 6,000, but now only 254. What was the miracle? This is what I said to you. What was the miracle that occurred in Italy? Take the coronavirus out of it for a second. My God, how did they cure the flu? That's a marvel of modern medicine that somehow they were able to take 6,000 people dying over that time period on an average year and lower it to 254. Was there a new flu drug? Was it a particularly weak strain of the flu? No, nothing suggests that. You know what it was? Because those people that die of the flu are now being said to die of the coronavirus. That's what the big mystery was. That's what I said 2 weeks ago before any of these reports came out. And that's exactly what's happening. How else would you explain? So instead of looking at, the way to look at this, instead of looking at, okay, how many people die of the flu versus how many people die of the coronavirus, we should look at how many people died of illnesses in 2019 in a particular area and how many people have died this year in that same particular area over the same time frame. Because if we just look at coronavirus numbers, we say, oh my God, 10,000 people in Italy died of coronavirus? That's insane. But the amount of people that have died from other diseases has lowered from a normal 9,000 to 200 people. What we're then looking at is, in total, casualties from illnesses are about 11 or 12,000 in Italy this year, when normally they would be about 10,000. That's the number we should be focusing on. Now, does that justify the stories you're hearing? The crematoriums can't keep up in Italy. Army trucks had to haul bodies. Over what? A 7-8% increase in the amount of people that died? Over a normal year? They're making it sound like the apocalypse, but it's not that. Again, the numbers don't lie. 1,800 people a day die in Italy of various causes. 12 of those is the coronavirus. 12 out of 1,800. And they're acting like it's the end of the world. Because you could use numbers and statistics to justify any crap that you want. Moving on. In March, head of the infectious disease, the Swiss Federal Office of Public Health, said the situation in the Swiss canton of Ticino was dramatic due to COVID-19. However, the doctors immediately denied this. Germany, it feels like we've been here before. German state minister called on population to be vigilant, report violation of rules for containing the corona epidemic to the police. It equals prohibited group formation, children in playgrounds, parties, and hikers. It's not just Germany getting nostalgic. Britain is following suit. UK police chief says that they're getting dozens of calls from people who say, I think my neighbor is going out on a second run. I want you to come and arrest them. And that's just a little of what we're seeing of neighbors turning on neighbors, police state actions. And why? Because these numbers are being so inflated. And the people that cheer on this government act, they can't wait to tell you every day. They can't wait to spin it in a different way. Did you know that in the United States, coronavirus is now the third leading cause of death? Over what time period? A week? We have 3,000 something people that died. 3.5 million people on average a year die in this country. And your sensationalized headline is third leading cause of death is 3,000, an illness that has killed 3,000 people? Now let's go to this letter that was written, and so you can see. Now, what's important to note is, unlike me, who's just a blowhard who's sitting here yelling about things on the internet. Sorry, I'm not getting to the chat here. I'll get to it here in a bit. Here's someone who's an actual medical professional saying, look, before we take these drastic actions like a lockdown, there are basic questions that should be answered. Now, I was considered, I'm not a medical professional. Shut up, Rob. People are dying. You don't care about deaths if you say that these questions should be answered. Here are medical professionals saying, look, governments are grossly misleading their population. These questions need answered. So here's the 5 questions he asked. I won't go through the whole article, but I'll just read the top here. As emeritus of the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz and longtime director for the Institute for Medical Microbiology, I feel obliged to critically question the far-reaching restrictions on public life that we are currently taking on ourselves in order to reduce the spread of COVID-19. It is expressly not my intention to play down the dangers of the virus or to spread a political message. However, I feel it's my duty to make a scientific contribution to putting the current data and facts into perspective, and in addition to ask questions that are in danger of being lost in heated debate. The reason for my concern lies, above all, in the truly unforeseeable socio-economic consequences of the drastic containment measures which are currently being applied in large parts of Europe and the United States, and which are also being practiced on large scale in Germany. My wish is to discuss critically and with the necessary foresight the advantages and disadvantages of restricting public life and the resulting long-term effects. Now, isn't that exactly what we should have demanded before we collapsed the economy? Before we took these rights away? Let's have a serious discussion about the cost benefits. A transparent, open discussion where the people that are going to enforce these restrictions answer basic questions about it. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me. To this end, I'm confronted with 5 questions which have not been answered sufficiently so far, but which are indispensable for a balanced analysis. I would like to ask you to comment quickly and, at the same time, appeal to the federal government to develop strategies that effectively protect risk groups without restricting public life across the board, and sows the seeds for an even more intensive polarization of society that's already taking place. With utmost respect, Professor Becdotti. Now, again, I recommended that Stanford doctor interviewed by Ben Shapiro. He says, talking about the numerator and denominator, that his gut feelings that the deaths aren't going to remotely add up to what the model suggests. But he can't be 100% sure of that. But what he says is there's 2 types of viral infections like this that we could be dealing with that could lead to large-scale numbers. The first is a virus that doesn't spread to as many people, but has a ridiculously high mortality rate. And he says with that type of virus, then yes, the current policies that we see of lockdowns and things like that, that is how you effectively fight that. Because you want to contain the spread at all cost. But the other possibility is that a lot of people are dying because it spreads so fast into so many people, but it has a low mortality rate. And he anticipates that's what we'll see when we start testing people, that millions more people have had this virus than was previously thought, which means that the mortality rate is so much lower. Because of that, it's near impossible to stop this from spreading to each town and from a lot of people getting it. So the way to correctly combat this isn't to lock down towns because it's going to spread there anyways. It's to quarantine as best as possible, particularly at-risk populations. And so the young, healthy people should keep the economy going, should keep going to work. People that aren't at risk should continue to socialize, continue to patronize businesses, etc. And then we do our best to try to contain the population that would be most at risk. He says the problem is if you develop the first strategy, the lockdown, but it's not that high mortality rate disease, you actually increase the amount of people that will die. Because what ends up happening is you destroy the economy to the effect that health services across the board are declined, which ends up leading to more people dying. That's just of the health aspects of it. Not to mention all the things I was talking about. That's why it's important to answer these basic questions that this German doctor is talking about. What is the effective mortality rate? How infectious is the disease? We don't have answers to any of that. We just locked down. And as this doctor in Germany is saying, that is not the correct response, because the deaths and the livelihoods ruined because of the socioeconomic impacts will outweigh the virus. Statistics. In infectiology, founded by Robert Koch himself, the traditional distinction is made between infection and disease. An illness requires a clinical manifestation. Therefore, only patients with symptoms such as fever or cough should be included in the statistics as new cases. In other words, a new infection is measured by the COVID-19 test does not necessarily mean that we are dealing with a newly ill patient who needs a hospital bed. However, it is currently assumed that 5% of all infected people become seriously ill and require ventilation. Projections based on this estimate suggest the healthcare system could be overburdened. Question. Did the projections make a distinction between symptom-free infected people and actual sick patients, i.e. who develop symptoms? Because that number of 5% of people needing ventilators is grossly overestimated if you only take into account the people that have been reported sick. Because there are so many people that weren't reported sick with COVID-19 because the symptoms weren't strong enough or they were asymptomatic. Dangerousness. A number of coronaviruses have been circulating for a long time, largely unnoticed by the media. If it should turn out that COVID-19 virus should not be ascribed a significantly higher risk potential than already circulating coronaviruses, all countermeasures would obviously become unnecessary. The internationally recognized International Journal of Antimicrobial Agents will soon publish a paper that addresses exactly this question. Preliminary results of the study can already be seen today and lead to the conclusion that the new virus is not different from traditional coronaviruses in terms of dangerousness. The author expresses this in the title of the paper, SARS-CoV-2, Fear versus Data. The question, how does the current workload of intensive care units with patients with diagnosed COVID-19 compare to other coronavirus infections? And to what extent will this data be taken into account in further decision-making by the federal government? In addition, has the above study been taken into account in planning so far? Here too, of course, diagnosed means that the virus plays a decisive role in the patient's state of illness, and not that the previous illness plays a greater role. In other words, and this speaks to what I'm saying, what's to say that then in the future we won't say, oh, here's another particularly bad cold season, we have to lock everything down? Did they take into account that the studies seem to be suggesting that this is no more dangerous than coronaviruses we've seen in the past? Or is it just fear-mongering? Because that's the conclusion that this paper reaches. So where is the government's model? Where's their data that's different? They won't give it to us. 3, dissemination. According to the report in the whatever, not even the much-cited Robert Koch Institute knows exactly how much is tested for COVID-19. It is a fact, however, that a rapid increase in the number of cases has recently been observed in Germany as the volume of tests increased. It is therefore reasonable to suspect that the virus has already spread unnoticed in the healthy population. This would have 2 consequences. Firstly, it would mean that the official death rate on 26th of March 2020, for example, there were 206 deaths from 37,000 infections, or 0.55%, is way too high. And secondly, it would mean that it would hardly be possible to prevent the virus from spreading in a healthy population. Question, has there already been a random sample of healthy general population to validate the real spread of the virus, or is this planned in the near future? This is what I was just talking about. If it turns out that millions more people had this virus than it is first anticipated, then the mortality rate collapses and the idea of locking us down is irrelevant. It's already spread through these populations. Why haven't we seen these general population tests? That should have been priority number 1. Well, stopping the people that are, doing what we can to the people that are suffering severe effects right now. Priority 1. Priority 2, random testing of the population in general to find out how lethal this is, how infectious it is, how many people have already contracted the disease. What good is it locking down a population that is already spread through? Mortality. The fear of the rise in death rate in Germany, currently at 0.55%. In the United States, I believe the number is like 1.4%. Is currently the subject of particularly intense media attention. Many people are worried it could shoot up like Italy to 10% or Spain 7% if actions aren't taken in time. At the same time, the mistake is being made worldwide to report virus-related deaths as soon as it is established that the virus was present at the time of death. That's what that whole Twitter thread I just read to you was about. This violates a basic principle of infectiology. Only when it is certain that an agent has played a significant role in the disease or death may diagnosis be made. The Association of Scientific Medical Societies of Germany expressly writes in its guidelines, quote, in addition to the cause of death, a causal chain must be stated with the corresponding underlying disease in third place on the death certificate. Occasionally, four-link causal chains must be stated. In other words, you can't just say someone that had the disease died of the disease. You have to be able to significantly prove that that was the cause of death. And that's not what's occurring in Germany right now. The same is true in the United States. He continues, at present, there's no official information on whether, at least in retrospect, more critical analysis of medical records have been undertaken to determine how many deaths were actually caused by the virus. Question, has Germany simply followed this trend of COVID-19 general suspicion? And is it intended to continue this categorization uncritically as in other countries? How then is a distinction to be made between genuine corona-related deaths and accidental virus in the place of time and death? And last, I'll just read his question. What efforts are being made to make the population aware of these elementary differences and to make people understand scenarios like those in Italy and Spain are not realistic here? Because he talks about how the situation is so much different in those places. Now, I could get back to the chat and stuff now. That's not just layman Rob. That's not just people that don't care about people dying. These are medical professionals around the world that are speaking up saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing? The fear-mongering, the economic collapse is going to be worse than the virus itself. Now, go back to what my original criteria was here. We should have forced the government to answer these basic questions before we accepted the infringements on our rights, before we accepted the collapse of our economy. And I was told by people on the left, people on the right, all across the spectrum, no, we can't do that. Well, now what if it turns out that basically no one was helped by these actions, and we've collapsed the economy, and now millions of lives will be negatively affected in a serious way as a result? It's like thinking that you have gangrene in your finger, so you cut your hand off, only to have the doctor say, oh, our bad. That wasn't gangrene, it was just a hangnail. Too late now, you cut your hand off. Don't you think it would be best to have some questions answered before you just rush to cut your hand off? So that's what we're looking at. So when people are telling you, oh, did you see how many people died today? How do we trust those numbers? How many people at the end of the day? Now, I'm not saying that no one has died as a result of this virus. I'm not saying that the total deaths that we see at the end of this country won't be higher because of this, by any of the sorts of reactions that we're seeing. So in Pennsylvania particularly, and this is true, Pennsylvania is a microcosm of the greater country. I just happen to know more about Pennsylvania because I'm here and I'm following it. You have to understand the makeup of Pennsylvania. We have Erie, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. And those are the massive urban populations. And then the rest of the state, most of it's very rural. There's some, you have Harrisburg and a couple places like that. Most of it's pretty rural. How are the particular policy descriptions for Philadelphia applying to where I live in rural Clarion County? Now, let me give you a real story. I'm not going to give names or anything like that. I know of a person who has a problem with seizures. A young adult has a problem with seizures. So much so that when they have them, sometimes they shatter their shoulders because they fall so hard. So a lot of times they end up getting hospitalized when they have these seizures. They were supposed to have a surgery, a brain surgery because none of the medication has been successful in stopping these seizures. That brain surgery is now considered an elective surgery. Elective brain surgery. So it's put off indefinitely. In addition, this person had a seizure the other day. Was taken by ambulance to a hospital. Now, they know that normally these seizures come in packs. So normally when they go, they stay until several seizures occur and everything's stabilized and then they could leave. This time it was only an hour. Over fears of this virus. In a rural hospital I believe in Jefferson County, which to my knowledge, not one person has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Not one person in this entire county. But the hospital's almost completely empty, and they're shipping people out that are sick because they are believing this fear-mongering that any moment 1,000 people could rush in with COVID-19. So as a result, they sent this person home, who then predictably, 20 minutes after they left the hospital, had a terrible seizure, which resulted in the ambulance having to come again. And possible injuries reoccurring to joints and things like that, where surgeries had occurred in the past. Why? Because our governor and our federal government in general, when they speak of this, they're talking about situations like in New York City. We don't even know if it's true. I've heard conflicting reports of, everything's overwhelmed in New York City. But even if that was true, that's not what the hospital situation is in Clarion County or in Jefferson County, in these rural areas. Yet the doctors there are preparing like they're in New York City. So we have to have every bed free. So if you go in with a serious medical condition, but they don't deem it life-threatening and it's not corona, out the door. If you have a serious surgery that you need done, sorry, it's elective. And so we have empty hospitals. Then what's happening? Article after article. Go ahead. Go to your favorite. Go to DuckDuckGo or whatever and search this up. Hospitals furloughing employees. Places like Kansas, Chicago, other places in Illinois, Ohio, furloughing 500, 600, 700 hospital workers. Why? Because they're going bankrupt. Because so many hospitals are completely empty right now. Because they're all preparing for the apocalypse. Now listen, even if the virus would come to my hometown, it's not going to be all of a sudden 1,000 people rush into the hospital. You're going to start to see a trickle. One person gets it, and then maybe another week, then a second, then a third, then a fourth, then 5 come in the next day, then maybe 10, then 15. But you're going to have that period where it starts off slow. So to keep your hospital empty over the fear of, oh man, they could rush in at any minute, it makes no sense. And you're actually endangering people's health as a result of this. Now, how hard would it be to understand, and Trump said this, but they're not enacting it. He said, look, maybe we treat different places differently. Farmland, for example, farm country here in the United States. The restrictions there, maybe you end up being way more laxed because there's not as concentrated as a population. In Pennsylvania here, we have these cities. Todd Bartley, who's the journalist that I talked to, he's been asking these questions. Here's a simple question I had. Do we have people in Tom Wolf, in the governor's team, that are on the phone with each hospital in the state routinely to say, here's what we anticipate for your specific area? Or are they just issuing general guidelines for all hospitals as if they're all the same? Because if so, that's incredible incompetence. That's leading to the jeopardization of people's health needlessly and people in hospitals that aren't going to deal with the virus in places like Philadelphia. But all of that's made possible by the idea that there's this prevalent thought of the government has our best interests in mind. Daddy government will take care of us. We don't have the right to question them. The signals that we're getting from the federal level, the whole way down to the state level, are mixed signals. On one hand, we're being told, it's not that big of a deal. If you go to the Google website that Trump touted that he was working on Google with, it says the symptoms are basically flu-like. Now they're changing it. We're being told, let's take this example. Let's take New York, right? We're told that, report after report I heard last week saying, hospitals overrun. Selective video shot of, oh my God, look at how many ambulances are trying to get into this hospital in New York City. Now I see people, independent content creators, going to those same hospitals and filming. It's like, it's dead. There's no one here. Almost like they were there just for the cameras. Now, let me give the benefit of the doubt and say, at that point, it wasn't a stage shot. That happened to be, at that point, how many people were coming in. But it's erroneous to act like that's occurring 24/7. We don't have proof of that. And so we're told that, not in the future, right? Keep in mind, this is an important distinction. They weren't saying hospitals in New York could be overran in the future. They didn't say that. They said right now they're being overran. Trump's not doing enough right now. That's what they said. We need more ventilators. We need more ICU beds. Trump's not doing enough now. The federal government's not doing enough now. Then we found out that Governor Cuomo knew that there were 700 ventilators sitting in a warehouse. So when he's interviewed about it, and this was Saturday, this is after a week of hearing the hospitals are overran. There's not enough ventilators now. That's how the media was pitching it to you, to me, to the American people. That's what we were being told. So after a week of that, a journalist says, Mr. Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, 700 ventilators sitting in if everything's being overran, why are they still sitting in a warehouse? And what did Cuomo say? Oh, no, we're fine on ventilators now. It's just we're anticipating in 20 days that we'll need X amount and that 700 won't be enough. In other words, you were lied to. How about the story that hospitals around the nation were issuing do not resuscitate orders? I saw reports that said hospitals in Kansas, hospitals in Nebraska, hospitals in New York. Meanwhile, you could check at the time that story circulated. Okay, let's look at Nebraska. How many people have died of corona? 3, 4? So hospitals are all the same. Well, 3 people died. That's it. Just don't bring anyone back that goes on. Are you kidding me? You had CBS showing a picture of a New York City hospital overran. Oops, sorry. It was Italy. They took footage from an Italian hospital and labeled it as a New York City hospital to show how understaffed and overran it was. It's propaganda. Now, am I saying that people aren't dying of this virus? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, as predicted, people are exploiting this to spend trillions of dollars that will end up going into their special interest pocketbooks to take away your rights and erode the middle class, which has been a plan of theirs for a long time, and to do other things to virtue signal how great they are in saving everyone's life. And they're not being honest with you. They're sensationalizing things. Why the need for CBS to use an Italian hospital as footage if the New York hospitals are as bad as they are telling us? And why does this always happen? Remember the Rolling Stone, their story, the UVA rape case, where they went out rape shopping to find the perfect rape to get the most ratings and most viewers? Why do they have to make fake stories up if it's as bad as they say? Or Jussie Smollett, why do they have to make that story up if racism's as prevalent as they say? It's the same here. If the hospitals are overran, why are you showing us footage from Italy and saying it's New York? Why are you making up garbage about do not resuscitate orders if the situation's as bad as you're saying? And that has real world impacts. You would not believe the sad stories that I'm hearing of people that are losing their livelihoods. But then in addition to that, the crazy rumors that people are believing. I had someone call me and say that they'd heard that they were not allowed, this is an elderly person, they weren't allowed to leave their home to buy groceries because the National Guard is arresting people in Pennsylvania that leave their home. Now, that's not true. But rumors like that and fear-mongering like that is allowed to circulate in a world where the media and the government is over-sensationalizing everything. We have other mixed signals. What is an essential business here in Pennsylvania? A mulch place is still open. I've heard of places such as confectionery shops that sell chocolate still open. The place that makes the carpenters that work at the trailer factory in my town, no, they're closed. How do you make these decisions? If this is an end of the world virus, why in God's name is the candy shop still open? No, make no mistake about it. I'm happy the candy shop's open. I think it's absurd that any of these places were shut down. But it sends a mixed signal to the population. Wait a minute. If it's so serious, why in God's name is the candy shop open? It just, these mixed signals, and people say, well, if the government would have came out and said how many people their models showed could have potentially died, it would have caused panic. What causes real panic is the unknown. What causes real panic is the belief that you're being misled and lied to. That's where the real panic is. And that's all I see from every level of our government. The economic ramifications of this are going to be incredible. So that's basically what I had for today. Again, let me make it as clear as possible. I was not saying that the government should never be allowed to take steps. Let's say that theoretically, a hurricane's coming through. It devastates a town. Can the government say, look, we are asking you to evacuate your house. We're telling you have to evacuate your house because this hurricane's coming. You might not comply, but understand in that situation, because if you don't comply and then rescuers have to risk their life to come save you, I get it. If a disease is coming through that's 30% mortality rate, killing hundreds of thousands of people, yes, I get it. I'm not saying the government shouldn't act, but it's not a all or nothing proposition. And that's the position that the government cheerleaders and the bootlickers want to put you in. Oh, so you think that it's a hoax? You didn't want the government to do anything? Then 2.2 million people would die. No, that's not what I'm suggesting. Was that what the doctor I just read to you suggested? Is that what the doctor that was interviewed by Ben Shapiro from Stanford suggested? No. He said, and this is what I've said all along, if there's a small percent of people that this is likely to devastate, then you do your best to control that small percentage of people. You don't shut down everyone in hopes that it won't get to those small percentage of people. There's all kinds of things we could have done. There's money we could have spent on ventilators, on ICU beds, on testing kits, etc. I don't mind any of that if the government was transparent from the get-go and answered basic questions. I've had my leg peed on one too many times to just accept anything they say unquestioningly when they say, let us take your rights away. Let us take your money away. We want to spend trillions of dollars. That's all I'm saying. Yes, maybe the government would have come out, gave their models, gave their threshold, said how many lives they thought their plan could have saved, how many lives it would have devastated. And maybe they would have been wrong. I can accept that. I don't expect leaders to be perfect. But at least they would have been transparent and gave us the reasons for why they were doing things. They won't do that. One, because of corruption, because they want a power grab. But there's another reason. Because they don't want to be proven wrong. And I don't envy the position that leaders are put in, particularly someone like Trump or a governor. It's a difficult position. Sometimes you'll be asked, imagine this, just has nothing to do with the virus. Just imagine being woke up in the middle of the night if you're president and a general tells you, Mr. President, one of the big terrorist leaders that we're after, we see that they're at a wedding right now. We could take them out right now, but there's going to be 30 or 40 innocent people in this wedding party or at the wedding celebrating that'll probably die that don't have anything to do with terrorism. That's a heavy, heavy decision. You're weighing the innocent lives that'll be lost there versus the lives that could be lost by not, if you allow this terrorist to escape and they kill people in the future. And stuff like that probably occurs all the time as a world leader like the president. And there's situations as a governor that could be very troubling because most things in life, particularly when you're in a position of leadership, it's not cut and dry. You are weighing things like liberty versus safety constantly. We do it in our lives constantly. It's one thing to do it for your life, but once other people are counting on you, now that's a whole new ballgame. So I get it. And I don't expect the answers to be perfect. But they're afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of being able to be shown you were way off. So what do? They set the conditions up so that no matter what happens, they're deemed right. So they don't answer any of these relevant questions. They don't answer questions about their models or the threshold. Even now when they're answering, and people say, oh, now Dr. Fokey's answered some of those questions. Well, too little, too late. They should have answered the modeling questions beforehand. And even now, if you listen to Dr. Fokey, he says, well, 2.2 million could have died if we didn't do anything. And now we're looking at 100 to 240,000 with the actions we've taken. But we don't know. Models are crazy and there's no evidence that this will be true. No, I get it. That's probably true, what Fokey's saying about the models. But even that, it's setting up the condition where they can't be wrong. And because they didn't give their threshold for when to institute this lockdown or a threshold from when to lift the lockdown, and they didn't give any of those other answers, they'll say, yes, we were right to do what we do. It doesn't matter what the end result is. No one more dies? Yep, we saved everyone's life. Millions more die? Yep, we were right to take away your rights to try to solve it. So conveniently, All the governors basically are on the same page. The federal government's on the same page. And they have all set up the condition where, well, we'll just basically keep the public in the dark, and then we can say we did the right thing. So that's where I'm at. That's why answering those basic questions. And again, this will be used even if you think, yes, this virus is the real deal, which it is real. Don't get me wrong. The virus is real. But it's as bad as you think that it's going to be as bad as what you've heard these models say. Remember, the fact that you've given the government the power, in this case, you think justifiably to do this, doesn't mean that down the road they won't use it unjustifiably. I guarantee they will. Every single time that you give the government massive power like this, particularly if it's unquestioningly, someone you don't like will eventually wield that power. So, all right. I got like 15 minutes and then I got to go to work. So I missed a lot of the chat, but does anyone have any specific questions on what's going on? I could talk to you if you want just a little bit about, how things are going with me. Look, I'm doing okay, personally. That's not what this is about. The first thing you all should be concerned with is yourselves and your family and doing personal responsibility to make sure that you're protected and you're doing everything you can. That might look different from each population. I'm not an expert on that, but that's certainly understandable. People have been saying that, well, I'm taking the position I'm taking because, I'm critical of the government because I lost my job. I did not lose my job. My hours have increased. My wife did not lose her job. I'm very fortunate at this point economically that my job was not affected because it's deemed essential. So me sitting here telling you it's not, I'm just worried about myself economically. I'm worried about the country. I've had people tell me that I'm trying to get more subscribers or more viewers by taking this position. That couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, today I actually had a good showing, 30 people. I had 60 people on average watching live streams until I started to criticize the administration. Tons of people unsubscribe, or if not unsubscribe, just not viewing anymore. So it's not about me personally gaining. I'm specifically telling people, normally I come on here and I'm like, hey, I need money for this, that. I'm not asking for that anymore because what's more important is keeping yourselves and your families surviving through this crazy time. So, I mean, it's not a matter of just me saying, this is how would benefit me personally. I said from the get-go, if I was looking to vote or to argue for things that would benefit myself the most, I probably would be on here talking about how Bernie Sanders' plan to eliminate student loan debt was a great idea because I got like over $80,000 of it. But I say all the time, I borrowed the money. It's my responsibility. You shouldn't have to pay for it. So I'm not, take it for what you want, but I'm not just here trying to benefit myself personally. I really am concerned with the future of the country. And I told this little story, but I hope that you believe this is true. Like I feel that we stand on the shoulders of giants and all the generations before us that made this country the greatest country in the history of the world. And I don't want to be part of the reason that it collapses. My generation or my time. And, the story I told is imagine I die and, you're in heaven and there's Ben Franklin and Jefferson and Washington and they're all partying. And you go up and they're like, hey, man, you lived in our country. How was it? And I'm like, it's great, man. It was the greatest country in the history of the world. And they're like, hey, we heard something terrible, though. We heard that it fell apart. What was it? Did an asteroid hit? Were you invaded by another foreign power? What was it? And I say, nah, man, there was a cold virus. And we all got freaked out and voluntarily gave all of our rights away and destroyed the economy. Is that where we want to be? That's not where I want to be. I get it. It's difficult. And look, I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I know I come off as such, and it's something I need to work on. But when people, I can handle someone disagreeing with me. The one person I had on here who was a never-Trumper, who was a conservative, that kind of came on and we had a discussion before this virus thing was a big story. And, I let him say his piece I was like, people were asking if you're a Democrat. You're not a Democrat, though, right? Here, go ahead and sit. And he's like, yeah, I'm not a Democrat. And he left that and immediately went on Twitter and said, Rob called me a Democrat. No, I didn't. I specifically, we had disagreements, but we agreed on a lot of stuff. And we agreed on a lot of what we disliked about Trump. that he wasn't really a fiscal conservative and that we would like to see someone more. We just disagreed on, I said at the time, the most important thing was fighting back against the corruption and that Trump was doing that better than any president that I'd seen. But much was left to be desired, like actually holding the corrupt people like Comey, Clapper, Brennan, etc., throwing them in jail. That person disagreed and said that he thought the FBI was great and they didn't do anything wrong. Okay. They get a hold of me the other day and they're like, I don't know what the point was. Somehow Trump's bad now. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been criticizing the administration. And it just led to like this crazy, I got blocked on Twitter and stuff by him over this because I was like, look, just because you said I didn't like Trump for his fiscal conservatism, but I cheered on the impeachment of him and I cheered on the FBI and what they were doing to him. That doesn't mean that somehow you're proven right if Trump later does something in the future that I disagree with. And that's the mistake people are making. To me, it's not about the individual. It's about principles. It's about policies. You could still support a party, a president, even if they don't agree in totality with what you're doing or what you believe. I say this all the time. If you're a free-thinking person, you will never find another person in the world or in the history of the world that thinks exactly like you. Which by default means you won't find a politician or a political party that thinks exactly like you. So you just associate with people that are most closely aligned with you, or that on the biggest issues are most likely to agree with you. I find that the fact that our voices no longer matter because corruption is so endemic in our political system to be the most important thing. I think that the election of Donald Trump forced those people to out themselves in a way we've never seen. That's a good thing. Does that mean I'm happy with everything Trump did? No. I took heat because I complained with him on Syria. I took heat because I complained about him with the deficit spending. I'm complaining with his actions now. Even though he's not the one doing a lot of these shutdowns, he's endorsing state governors doing it. And he's $2 trillion infrastructure bill. What are you talking about? What does that have to do as an emergency to fight this virus? Things like that. You might disagree with me on some of that stuff. But that's life. We're going to disagree on certain things. So, I don't know where this, I hope I never came across as someone who's, I just love the Republicans and everything they do and everything Trump does. That's not what I'm trying to be. And I hope that now it's not coming up as, I hate everything about Trump. I'm going to vote for Democrat, because it's certainly not the case. My criticisms of Trump, what I'm trying to say is I feel like, look at the gun thing. Like, I don't know that Trump necessarily is an expert on a lot of these issues. And he's got all these terrible people around him that are deep state people saying, Mr. Trump, do this, do this, do this, do this. And then when we, the American people that actually supported him and voted for him, speak up and we're like, no, then he's like, oh, okay. It's the same with this. I think that when he started talking about the economy, it was because he heard the millions of Americans that were like, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay rent? I'm going to lose my business. So when he heard from those people, he was like, oh, because all he had around him was people, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. So my criticizing of the Trump administration is not me saying I hope he fails. My criticism is I hope he hears us and changes course. And a lot of people I feel just are like, I don't want to hear anything negative that Trump could do. And that's fine. That's your prerogative. But, and lastly, I'll leave you on a down note. One of the, I'll eat crow when I have to. And let me tell you something that I've been more wrong on than probably anything else that I've talked about. I thought, even though I've considered, I know it says shit down, which is fine. It is a shit down. So, I'll change it after this so I don't get YouTube trouble. I'm pessimistic in that I've been saying I don't think that Barr's going to arrest any of these criminals. I think the establishment will win as far as that goes, but the war will go on. But I was optimistic that people were waking up. And there are people waking up, don't get me wrong. We have lost, we as people that are free thinkers that are against the establishment, we have lost so bad it's ridiculous. We have been dealt a crushing defeat. I was, even in my pessimism, way too optimistic at how many people were waking up. I was wrong. There is no way to slice this. They have achieved part of this globalist establishment dream in 3 weeks. And what I thought would be a slow process that would take years, it took them 3 weeks. Over a cold virus. Yeah, I get it. I'm being glib. It's worse than that, but still. It's not just the socialists that are like, yay, big government control. It's not just the moderate Democrats. You expect that from them. But the real devastating blow is to watch how many conservatives are all in on this. Who cares about your rights? Who cares about the economy? We have to trust the government. $8 trillion. We need to spend more than $8 trillion. And you start to realize, oh, I thought these people woke up, but they didn't. They were just on a side. They wanted their side to win. They don't like socialism if it's Bernie. They love socialism if it's Trump. And it's been a wake-up call for me. So that's the downer. The downer is we've been dealt a devastating blow. But the upshot is it's not over. I'm not going to give up. I've knocked down the mountain, so I'll start over from square one. You can't blindly trust everything the government says. You can't blindly trust everything the media says. They lie to you. It's inevitable that they'll be corrupt. We have to constantly push back against them. So I'll start at the beginning, again. And I'll start one by one trying to talk to people. I need to do better. I realize now that it's what did I do that was wrong? I should have been trying to reach more people. I should have made my message, keep it authentic, but able to reach more people. I should have been putting more material out there. I should have been doing more stuff in my real life. I got to run for Congress again. This time I got to win. I got to reach out and make connections to people that could help me with that of all different sides. So that's the good news. The good news is I am taking this defeat, which is a crushing defeat. Not just for me, by the way, but for any patriot, for any person who is skeptical of establishment government control. It is don't mince words. It is an epic defeat. Not only did we give up the rights, did we spend trillions of dollars, did we crush the economy, but we did so with the majority of the population saying anyone who dared question it was horrible and wanted people to die. So instead of lying about that defeat, I'm accepting the defeat, and I'm going to say, I hate the feeling of this, not just individually, but for my country, and so I'm going to do more to make sure that we don't lose in the end. So that's how I'm trying to approach this. I think the people that are like, oh, no, it's just temporary, but no, that's the wrong attitude to have. Take the loss, learn from it, and then make sure that somehow we could maybe not have a total collapse of the country and not have a system where this is just done every year over and over. So until I'm not drawing breath, that will be something that I'm fighting for. Yeah, exactly. Trains go by say, calling people racist wasn't working. Now it's going to be genocidist. That's the dog whistle. Yep. I hate old people. I want old people to die. What do you think is going to happen to elderly people in the world of a Great Depression? People that rely on others for food, shelter, and things like that. You think there's going to be more food and shelter? You think there's going to be more health care for these people? But I'm the one who doesn't care about them. So yeah, just a few programming notes. Friday at 5, I'll be talking to a person with a master's degree from Yale who's an entrepreneur in master's degree in economics, Monir Mahmood, who's going to be talking to me. I had a conversation with him for about 40 minutes. It's not going to be really criticizing the government. It's just going to be looking at the scale, the numbers of their emergency bills, the trillions of dollars, exactly which bill is going to do what, looking at numbers like what exactly does 30%, 1/3 of the people in the country of working age population being unemployed. What does that mean? What does it mean if we lose small businesses and they don't come back? what does that look like economically for us? What does it mean with the Fed increasing, basically printing $4 trillion in liquidity? So he's going to answer a bunch of questions like that just to give people an idea. And so if you could push that, I think it'll be really good. And I'm also going to be doing another video at some point with journalist Todd Bartley. Again, check out that video from last Wednesday. It's not necessarily us saying, "Oh, thank you, great informer." It's not necessarily that we're saying screw the Democrats, screw Trump. It's just trying to give the facts. So a great informer says, Robert, trust that Trump knows what he's doing and knows what's going on. I'm willing to bet they reopen the country in 30 days. Democrat governor who won't give up their emergency powers when the country's open. I mean, that could be true. Look, my take on this, it was similar when they didn't charge McCabe and they didn't charge Comey. And I had people saying, trust that Trump knows what he's doing. Maybe. But I don't have blind trust in things. The way I operate is what I could see with my own eyes. So I guess I hope that Trump really has a plan and he really knows what he's doing. But from where I'm sitting, I don't know how that plan saves my friend that just lost his business up the road, that'll probably never open his doors again. I don't know how that plan helps the person I was talking to that has seizures that's now going to suffer through who knows how many more months because of this. I don't know how that plan is going to be worth it for them in the future. Maybe it will be. I hope I'm wrong. But all I can do right now is report on what I see. And I'm giving you my honest opinion. And it hurts me. And look, it hurts me to even I wish that I would wake up tomorrow and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and AOC and everyone would be great Americans. And even if I disagreed with them, would be doing things that I said, yeah, I could credibly see how they're trying to benefit the country. But it's probably not going to happen. There's a far greater chance that someone like Trump and things like that actually are doing that. But I'm not going to, I hope that I'm wrong, but I'm not going to just not say anything. And again, this is what I said to the Q people. Let's say that the Q people are right and I was wrong to criticize the administration in this situation or the administration when it came to not arresting these criminals in the CIA, FBI, etc. If the Q people are right and I'm wrong, then no harm done. Q and Trump will solve all of it and it'll be good. But what if the Q people are wrong and I'm right? Then when it was most important to speak up, when these actions were occurring, we were all complacent and said, no, I'll just trust the situation. So I think it takes people of all stripes. If there are people out there that say, no, I still have faith in Trump and I think he's doing the right thing, maybe you're right. I hope you're right. But I'm not going to unquestionably accept things from anyone, not even someone I voted for. That's just who I am. So, right. I mean, there's question, and it doesn't have to be a Q thing. It could be, you could believe Trump has a plan and it has nothing to do with Q as well. You know what I mean? But yeah, you're absolutely right, Blase. Trust no one. My dad taught me that when I was a teen. He's right. Yeah, absolutely. You don't put blind faith. Don't put blind faith in me. Like I read that article from that German doctor. Look it up yourself. Read it yourself. Come to your own conclusions. Don't just accept my interpretation of it. I'm just giving you my authentic view on things. So I'm going to blow Ken out of the water in the next show. Oh, I didn't even check. Thank you for everyone who gave donations. Did anybody see, let me check D Live. I know Ken's always incredibly generous. Thank you, Great Informer. Thank you, WZ. I didn't see if anyone else donated, but all of you that donated, thanks. Please, please, please. Don't donate money if you're in a position where you think that, because of this crazy situation in 3-4 months, you could really use money. Look out for yourself first. I'm going to get by. I'll be fine. But, I do appreciate donations, but I'm not going to, my lemon balance is up to 7,500. Holy smokes. Look out for yourself. Oh, thank you, Ken, Scarecrow, Tony. Thank all of you. I'll give out the lemons now, actually. So I always add lemons. And for those of you that are on YouTube, if you go over to dlive.tv and it's Rob Noer, capitalize R-O-B, and then capitalize N-O-E-R-R. And you can follow me on DLive, and YouTube's really putting a hammering on me. It's putting a hammering on a bunch of people that I work with on YouTube. So, okay. It should be distributing now. So yeah, I mean, it's really, I threw 100 of my own lemons in to give out in the chest here. So it'll be coming in a minute. But yeah, you can give out lemons and things like that, it's like a cryptocurrency. So yeah, check it out on DLive because YouTube's terrible. It really is. But I would stay on longer, but I do have to go to work. I have an appointment that I have to keep at work here and can't talk much about it. But yeah, thanks everyone for doing this. Oh, that toilet paper is still unused. I'll bring it up here later. So I might be doing a show later tonight with some people if I can find a guest. If not, 5 o'clock tomorrow, I'll be tuning in with Monir, and I think it'll be great. So congratulations, Don, Ken, and Ford Nation, the big lemon chest winners. So thank you all, everyone. I really appreciate it. Remember, don't just stay safe out there. Look, get angry. People tell me all the time, why are you so angry? This wasn't necessarily the most angry show. I think you should get more pissed off. You should be upset that you're being lied to, that your rights are being violated, that your economy is being stolen, that they're ushering in globalism and taking down the greatest country in the history of the world. You should be pissed off. But try to balance that with, look at the great things you see, like I started off the show. Even though there's a lot of horrible things happening right now, you can see inspiration in individuals and your loved ones, people that are close to you, and real people in your town doing real things to try to alleviate this situation and make it better. And I'm telling you, those people are out there. So don't get too depressed. Spend time with your loved ones. There are people thinking of you. There are people that we're trying to come together to win this fight. It's going to be a long uphill battle, but don't get too depressed over it. Like, we're all in it together. So, and for any of you that are suffering a really bad time for this, my heart goes out to you. Really let me know if there's anything I could do. But other than that, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to be heading out to work now. So as always, have a good one.